It's 4 p.m. We're bringing developing news.
And the stories behind the headlines. This is Storycon. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Ed Lingao. Some stories we're watching on the last day of this month, October 31st. Caloocan Congressman Edgar Erice has revealed that several retired generals from the AFP and the PNP plan to join the massive rally set for November 30. Erice says the former officials who previously met with former President Bongbong Marcos are calling for an end to corruption and are demanding genuine political and infrastructure reforms. He clarifies that the movement is not aimed at ousting Marcos but at pushing changes.
President Bongbong Marcos urged APEC leaders to strengthen regional cooperation and reform global trade rules to ensure fairness and inclusivity for smaller economies. That was during his speech at the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting informal dialogue in Gyeongju, South Korea today. He called for the restoration of the World Trade Organization dispute settlement mechanism and pushed for digital trade, agricultural, and fisheries reforms. After that, the president delivered his speech at the APEC CEO Summit. Back home, there have been some challenges in the observance of Undas 2025. There was a parking problem at the Loyola Memorial Park earlier because of limited space in the area, which can only accommodate around 400 vehicles. Overflow parking has been redirected to nearby establishments along Sukat Road. At the Manila South Cemetery, several individuals were apprehended today for carrying prohibited bladed weapons inside the premises. Major Manila cemeteries are expected to draw over 2 million visitors this Undas holiday.
And travelers continue flocking to the Parañaque Integrated Terminal Exchange or PTEX on Friday. PTEX has recorded over 100,000 passengers by mid-afternoon, and the figure could climb to 200,000 by day's end. At the NAIA, thousands of passengers packed terminals as flights remained full and lines stretched long. Airport authorities reminded travelers to arrive early and double-check flight details to avoid delays and missed flights. Meanwhile, bus terminals in Cubao saw a steady flow of provincial passengers bound for northern destinations like Baguio, Pangasinan, and Zambales. Terminal operators reported that online bookings have eased crowding, but walk-in commuters are still lining up for last-minute seats. And joining us today, Storycon's resident Halloween Halloween character.
Resident Scary Pandit, Resident...
Parang criminal character yung namagit.
Siya po'y kumanta ng may malalim na hugot kagabi sa aking Halloween party.
Gandang gabi po.
Si Raul Llamas.
Sinimulan ko yung Halloween sa pagkanta kagabi.
Oo, talagang kagimbal-gimbal.
Kagimbal
talaga.
Oo. Tumakbong palabas. Si
Oo.
Gretchen Ho. At saka si Cez Dillon.
Oo. Screaming and howling.
Parang torture. Screaming and howling. Okay, and also from the Philippine Star, of course, we've got Editor-in-Chief, Ami Pamintuan. Hi, Ami.
Hi, Ami.
Hi, everyone.
Very
Happy Halloween.
Para ka namang woman in white dyan sa Balete Drive, Ami.
Ghost. Kaya nga, ghost.
Hindi sa
Ghost
malala mo
yan,
yun, mga
ghost.
bata tayo, di ba? Sa Balete Drive, tinatakot tayo ng mga magulang na, may konjo, may white lady.
Hindi lang yun. Huwag ka magmamaneho mag-isa raw sa Balete Drive. Kasi pag lingin mo sa
tatabi
rearview
sa'yo.
mirror mo, may sumusunod sa yung, kahit mabilis ka, may sumusunod sa yung
White lady.
white lady. Tapos mamaya, nasa by your window na.
Mamaya katabi
Hindi,
mo
pero
na.
si Ami naman, kinakatakutan niya sa industriya.
Oo, lalo mga reporter niya.
Yung ghost takot sa akin.
Ghost.
Naka-ghost costume ako, ghost costume.
Tapos iba, yung white lady bigla na lang, pagtingin mo sa rearview mirror, wala na. Paglingon mo doon, nakaupo sa likod mo. Yung mga ganun.
katabi mo na.
Alam mo yun?
Yung pala,
Ganun.
yung pala, patalastas pala ng tide.
Wala, hindi pa pinapanganak si Red Snow.
Patalastas pala.
Kulang puting-puti.
Kung gusto mo lang, puting-puting. Gamitin ang Tide.
Tide.
Atay.
Hindi niya nag-gets. Inisip niya siguro, high tide.
Uy, nagets ko. May tide pa naman. Excuse me.
Zone
Hindi na
drops
uso yung
ang
balete drive.
Ha?
Hindi na uso yung balete drive.
Hindi na, ano na eh.
Lalaki ng
busy
puno
na balik.
ron, ha? Lalaki ng puno dati ron,
Oo,
di ba?
pero kasi dati nakakatakot madilim nun dati. Nung pa rin, Ronald.
Ngayon, marami ng solar lights.
Solar lights.
Compliments
Mas
ng mga
nakakatakot yung
insertions.
ghost
Eyes.
ngayon.
Mas kagimbal-gimbal ang ghost ngayon eh.
Mas nakakagimbal-gimbal yung ghost
Mga
ngayon.
ghosts, projects,
Cat's
ghosts.
eyes,
ghost
solar
engineers.
panels.
Uy! Nawala yung horse. Kahapon may horse dito.
Oo nga.
Nasama pala sa camera.
Oo,
A few
I
people
was telling
noticed.
you eh.
Hindi ko
The
na-realize
horse
kita
was
pala sa
smiling
camera.
at you from the left. I was looking at parang, she looks kind of funny, but it's
Hindi
okay.
ba sa'yo mo kahapon magkamukha kami ng horse?
Halloween, oh.
Oh, narinig ko
Pangalan
sinabi
niya
ko.
Ronaldo.
Oh, sa Disney yun, di
I
ba?
named him Ronaldo.
Ah? Well, that's a Disney horse. I think
Oh, that's
I've
a
seen it
Disney
before.
horse.
Oh, ayan.
Should I
So-
get
Kahit si Manny Mugato, Disney character siya.
sa Beauty and the Beast ba? Siguro hindi siya si Beauty, no?
Hindi.
So, this Halloween, last day na ng October. Bilis, no? This Halloween, ang dami nag-dress
November 1
up
na po bukas.
as ghost, flood control contractors and
Ito yung
engineers.
first Halloween after nung mga expose sa ghost
Ghost.
projects. Kaya yung mga bata, naka-costume ng DPWH.
DPWH.
Mga adults din. Like me, kagabi.
Pakita mo yung ano mo.
Sombrero mo.
Oo nga,
Hindi,
may
masisira,
cap. May cap is
masisira yung hairdo niya.
okay,
Tatlong
di-
oras inayos yan eh.
Uy, grabe. I was. Yung pareho sa suot ni Ronald kahapon. Diba? It came from you. Mine was DPWH
Hindi
contractor.
niya talaga tinanggal eh. The whole time. The other day yon, talagang hindi niya tinanggal.
Hanggang pagbaba, suot-suot ko.
Baka kasi
Okay.
baka maganda
Kaya
yung
tumahimik.
puhunan niya.
Pati mga bata talaga, merong maliliit na t-shirt na DPWH.
Oo, meron silang vest.
Tapos nagtitrick or
meron
treat
talaga.
sila. Humihingi sila para sa ghost projects daw. O, di ba?
Oo.
Pero tandaan niyo ng kabataan natin, ikaw kasi kabataan mo, panahon ng Kastila.
Kabats tayo.
Sila.
Tandaan mo, nung panahon natin, Ami, at ikaw panahon ng hapon ka naman eh. nung kabataan natin, pag October 31 tsaka November 1, walang trick-or-treating.
Nauso lang
Kami
yun.
meron.
Uy!
Kami meron.
Wala,
ha?
hindi pa uso.
Influence
Kailan
kami ng
lang
mga
yan?
Amerikano eh. Hindi naman kami Kastila eh.
Ano yung mga leftover POWs ng World War II, gano'n?
Di ba mga candy?
Kailan lang yan?
Di ba? Nung panahon natin,
Walang ganyan.
November 1, parang nagtatakutan kayong lahat, araw ng mga multo.
Magkikwentuhan kayo, ghost story.
Oo. Hindi trick-or-treating
Magkikwentuhan.
na mag-iikot kayo at mag-collecta, mag-extort ng candy.
Pero yung tinitira nyo nun, hindi
ngolekta kami
tequila.
yung tulo ng kandila. Tulo
yun.
ng kandila sa mga tomb.
Yun.
You know, dapat
gagawin mong
dapat
bilog.
Tapos biglang
nag-costume
mamamatay
tayo.
yung kandila. Di ba? Ganun.
Gagalaw yung baso. Alam mo, dapat
Ouija
nag-costume tayo, no? We should have.
Dapat
I
today
have costume. I'll wear it after the break.
I think
Hindi ka na
everyone's here.
makakakuha ng tulo ng kandila ngayon sa tomb kasi may nakatira doon. may mga nakatira doon. Hindi yung patay, yung buhay, nakatira doon sa
Dami.
tomb.
Ang dami. Mga walang
Ang
bahay.
dami.
Oo, ang dami.
Oo.
Okay.
Ang dami talaga. Oh, yan.
Ayan,
Saka
isa pang-
it reflects
Okay.
yung
Ito ba
istorya na
nakatira rin ba ito, Ron?
50%.
Ito ba nakatira rin yan doon?
50% of Filipinos, rate themselves poor, no? O
Okay.
yan, 50% of Filipinos.
Sige, let's check the situation at the biggest cemetery in Metro Manila. That's Manila North Cemetery.
Yan,
We've got-
nandyan yung mga puntod dyan.
Ayun.
Nandyan yung mga bahay pala sa puntod.
Oo. Mobile journalist Marimon Reyes is right there.
Hi, Marimon.
With a live report. Marimon,
Sumasayaw ka kanina, Mary Mon sumasayaw ka dyan
Hi, Mary Mon.
Kung hindi ghost project sa Senado.
Ghost, totoong ghost naman
Ghost to
yung
ghost. To
hinahabol
the real
mo.
ghost.
Kung sumasayaw si Mary Mon, I will survive. Yung kanyang sinasayaw.
Tama yan, Bok. Next week na natin atupagin yung ibang ghost doon sa Senado. Ngayon, dito muna tayo sa Manila North Cemetery. And so far, kung makikita nyo, itong likuran ko, ito yung exit, ito yung entrance, papasok mismo sa MNC. Maluwag na maluwag pa to. Bagaman libo-libo na yung naging bilang nila. At dito, tuloy-tuloy yung pagpasok ng mga bibisita until mamaya pa hanggang 9 o'clock PM ang visiting hours dito. For sure, bukas, baka wala na tayong makikitang ganitong daanan kasi usually ang peak season talaga pagdating sa Undas, November 1. Marami na raw ito pero karamihan sa mga nakausap din natin dito na nagbabantay, sinasabi mas marami din daw talaga bukas. Yung iba naman daw kasi nauna na October 29, October 30 sila bumisita pero expect daw natin na baka bukas mas pahirapan tayo dito. So far wala pa namang nai-report na nagkaroon ng kaso ng hinimatay na kinailangan agad-agad na ihatid. Pero marami kasi naka-station dito na Red Cross. Meron pagpasok, meron sa looban. So we're still yet to get reports from that. Pero bukas, mas lalong nakatutok dito ang security. Over 500 na police ang nakatutok dito sa Manila North Cemetery. And then bukod dyan, nasa loob din nito mismo yung mga e-trike. Pero bukas, wala na rin yung mga e-trike na nakapila para sa libreng sakay, libreng hatid dito sa mga bibisita kasi nga wala na raw madadaanan. Ang isang gamit na gamit dito is yung puntod finder na hindi na lang siya basta online. Physically, meron na silang assistance desk na nakalagay doon. Yan yung nakikita yung tent na nandyan para sa mga posibleng maligaw kasi over 54 hectares itong MNC. Yung iba naman pwedeng baka naligaw o nakalimutan nila. So pwede na silang magtanong doon. So after nun, pwede silang sumakay ng e-trike, diretso na doon sa puntod na or yung street mismo na kailangan nilang puntahan. So far, marami ring nahuli dito or na-confiscate na mga ipinagbabawal na gamit. Kasama na dyan ang mga panlinis, pintura, tulad ng walis, eto, mga sigarilyo, alcohol, flammable materials or objects yan. May vape din silang mga na-confiscate dito. Pero, nasanay tayo ng parang nasa Senate tayo lagi. Nagagamit natin yung kulimbat. Pero kung makikita ninyo, may mga number tags dyan. So, makikihiram lang po ng isa. So, etong box ng sigarilyo, may number tag para kung ayaw talagang bitawan nung mga nakumpiskahan, maaari pa rin naman daw nilang balikan o kunin yung kanilang mga gamit dito. Even yung mga pagkain na bitbit nila, pati yung mga inumin, chine-check nila kasi zero vendors dapat dito sa Manila North Cemetery. Pero marami pa rin yung nagpapwesto ng kanilang mga pinagbebentahan. Pinaliligpit siya ng mga otoridad dito, pero after a few minutes kasi ipapwesto ulit nila, folding table lang yung pinakaginagamit nila. Pero nakausap naman natin si Manila North Cemetery Director, si Sir Daniel Tan. Sabi niya naman, tuloy-tuloy naman daw yung pagronda nila at pagpapaalala dito. Makulit lang din daw talaga yung ilang mga nananatili sa loob.
54 hectares, ang laki niyan, ha? Ang laki ng North Cemetery.
Sobrang laki. Kaya nung sinubukan nating puntahan yung puntod ni FPJ tsaka ni Susan Roses, dito, kaliwa,
Sa main road
doon sa dulo sa pinakalikod yung at naglakad tayo 20-25 minutes pero naging worth it naman kasi nakakwentuhan din natin yung mga nandoon, yung mga sepulturero, yung mga nagbabantay, nag-aalaga ng mga pansyon. And may isa nga lang din tayo ditong nakausap na para nagkaroon ng problema doon sa puntod ng kanyang ina. Kasi nung bumisita sila 2 weeks ago, dapat maglilinis sila nung puntod. Nakita niya yung lapida, napalitan daw yung pangalan, natanggal daw yung pangalan ng kapatid niya. Ang nandoon na lang sa lapida, pangalan ng nanay niya, tapos may alien daw na pangalan na nilagay doon. So ang in-address dito na Director Tan, i-verify daw nila, hihintayin daw nila yung mga dokumento, babantayan din daw nila yung puntod para makita kung sino yung bibisita doon na mula doon sa pangalan na hindi nila kilala sa lapida. And so far naman by Monday daw kasi nga ang daming tao dito pero pinababalik itong nakausap natin para daw ma-double check yun. Balik sa iyo.
May pangalang
Mary
hindi nila
Mon, kumusta
kilala.
yung mga
Hindi alien na pangalan. Ko talaga. Pag alien na pangalan, Mork and Mindy yan, eh.
Mary Mon, kumusta yung mga nakatira dun sa may mga nakatira dyan yung residence nila yung sementeryo Kumusta sila? Pinaalis ba sila o okay lang na sige dyan na kayo nakatira, ano pang gagawin natin?
Yung iba dito na yung iba kasi ang nagiging tirahan nila yung mga puntod mismo, may mga pansyon. Kasi
Yeah.
karamihan dito may mga second floor, so medyo talaga komportable para sa ilan dito. Nakita natin kaninang umaga, nagliligpit sila kasi alam nilang pupunta yung mga may-ari talaga ng pansyon, yung sa kanila ipinagkatiwala yun. Pero so far naman mababait naman daw yung mga may-ari, kaya pagkatapos naman daw nito okay lang naman daw sa kanila, babalik na lang naman nila yung pwesto nila. So far okay naman sila dito. Natawag nung kanina nung nakausap natin na alien kasi hindi raw nila kilala kung sino yung nasa lapida na yon. Pero ang tinitingnan din pala, to add lang din, tinitingnan nilang anggulo dito, possibly daw baka distant relative yung nag-arrange no, hindi lang daw nila alam.
Yeah.
Kaya hinahanap nila yung documents kasi paano raw magagalaw yung lapida kung wala raw na ipresentang dokumento na nagsasabing may connection sila sa may-ari ng puntod.
Yeah.
So that's one. For the residents here, mamayang 8 o'clock, palalabasin na kasi lahat ng mga tao dito. Ang ginagawa nila, tulad last year, i-check din daw nila, especially sa mga sepulturero o yung mga caretaker dito, yung ID para raw masiguro na kung may magsistay man daw sa loob, sila lang daw talaga yung, kumbaga may authority para manatili sa loob. For the rest na non-residents and yung visitors lang talaga, kailangan talaga lumabas.
Yeah.
Starting by 8 p.m.
Okay. We'll let you go.
President, Hindi, pahabol ko lang. May upa ba yan? Presidente yan eh. Hindi ka naman basta-basta pwedeng magtayo kahit sa squatter area may nangungulekta eh. Meron bang nangungulekta ng rent?
Yan ang isa sa hinihintay din natin na matanong. Yung iba kasi, ang sinabi, pinapayagan naman na raw sila nung may-ari ng mga pansyon. So parang yun na yung access nila doon, yung consent nila. For the others, ang nasabi rin sa atin, since may ID yung mga caretaker, yun na rin yung parang nagiging access pass nila para magstay dito. Pero on the legalities talaga, kasi nakikita natin so far, parang yung mga settler dito, yung iba informal. So yun yung susubukin pa nating makuha yung panayam dito kaya Director Tan, kung paano nga ba nila i-address to. Kasi isa ring concern dito is yung safety. And kaya nga ang sinasuggest nila, lalong-lalo na yung mga ibang entry points, taasan na raw yung pader para iisa na lang talaga yung papasukin ng mga bibisita. And para yung mga non-residents, hindi raw talaga makakatawid o makakapanloob dito sa Manila North Cemetery.
Okay.
Merimon, wala ka ba naramdaman dyan na
Go to
mga multo, mga ghost? No, dahil
Okay.
yung mga Memorial Park, binabaha rin yan eh. No, nakita ko ng ilang bagyo, binabaha yung mga
Ang gulo mo,
Memorial Park. Oo, tapos yung mga nakatira dyan, nandun, nasa taas ng mga puntod. No, dahil sobra yung baha. Kaya wala ka naramdaman.
Yung sementerong yan, binabahayan.
Wala ka naramdaman?
Yung mga kamag-anak ako dyan eh.
Oo.
Binabaha siya.
So far, Ronald, nung hinanap kasi natin yung libingan dito ng mga pet, ng mga alagang aso, pusa, nasa may looban kasi siya na bahagi, mababagsak ang signal doon. So medyo umikot yung tiyan natin nung nakita natin yung lugar na yon. Kasi hindi rin mataas na rin kasi yung damo sa lugar na yon. Biyak-biyak na rin yung lapida ng ilang mga nakahimlay doon na mga fur babies. Siguro feel ko baka naman lang din yon sa panahon lang din. Pero medyo iba yung ihip ng hangin doon sa loobang part na yon ng MNC. Pero for the rest naman, so far normal naman, nagdamo naman sila, malinis naman yung mga pamunahing daanan dito, kaya siguro ibang ghosts na lang yung sasalubungin ko pagbalik sa Senado next week.
Sobrang dami kasi ng libingan. Dapat kasi dyan, regulated dyan eh. Dapat may limits eh. Eh walang limits eh. Diyan. Kaya yung drainage dyan, talagang
Okay.
horror story rin.
Maraming horror stories talaga and when it comes to infrastructure. But we will let you go. Thank you so much for talking to us and for that live report. Mobile journalist Marimon Reyes reporting live from the Manila North Cemetery.
Thank you,
We have
Mary
to take a
Mon.
quick break. Uy, by the way, very quick aside. Speaking of presidents, napadaan ako sa
Manila-
Puntod,
Manila
ni
Memorial.
former President
Noy.
Noy. Oo, si Pinoy. Doon sa Manila Memorial when I went to visit my parents.
Wala nakagat
may-
ng work and mean din.
May wreath from President Bongbong Marcos. Every year ba yun? Or parang nagulat lang ako that there was a wreath.
Malamang.
For Noynoy,
Pinoy, for Pinoy.
Yeah,
For
sure,
Noy,
meron yun.
Dahil former president.
Magkaibigan naman daw sila, di ba?
Former
Magkaibigan
president,
si
ginagawa
Noy
yun,
and
no?
ano.
tsaka doesn't have to have the approval of the president naman.
Of course. I was
I'm
just
sure there's somebody who does that.
Ginagawa lang kanya ng protocol.
Protocol talaga. Sa lahat ng former presidents,
Oo.
nagpapadala talaga ang president. Good to know. Okay, we'll pause for a quick break. You're watching Storycon. We'll be right back. Please stay with us.
This is the Story Conference Group or the Storycon Group.
We've got developing news in the stories behind the headlines. Welcome back to Storycon, the Story Conference. I'm Ed Lingao.
And I'm Regina Lay. Still with us, Ami Pomituan of the Philippine Star, and Ronald Llamas, our resident political pundit, who has a new cap, by the way.
Pakita.
can see
Show,
it.
show, show. It's his Halloween cap.
That's
How
my,
terrifying.
That's my cap, by the way.
Is
But
that
let's
terrifying?
Yeah.
let's get right to it and bring in our guest for today. It says in the flesh, we've got maritime security expert Ray Powell back in the studio and back in Manila. He's the director of Sea Light, the Gordon Knott Center. Welcome back to Storycon, Ray.
Welcome back.
Reggie.
Welcome back.
Ray Powell is in the house.
I am in the house. No costume.
Are you gonna rap? Is he gonna rap?
You don't want to hear that.
Okay, we're talking to you today over a couple of things. First off, you testified at a Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing
did.
in the States about the U.S.'s Indo-Pacific strategy. How did that go?
Well, actually, it went very well overall because there are a few places where you can find general agreement in Washington, D.C., even in the era of a government shutdown over everything else. So they invited three of us in, myself, Craig Singleton, and Eli Ratner, to talk about essentially, combating China's gray zone strategy. And my testimony was all about the fact that the United States, after 5 decades of watching China conduct a gray zone war in the South China Sea, actually needs a strategy. And so that seems odd to say that after 5 decades we still don't really have a strategy, but that was my contention. We still don't really have a strategy.
So for now, there's not an iota of a strategy.
Look, there have been lots of pieces of strategies.
Because you have an
right?
Asia pivot during the time of Obama.
Oh, yeah.
Then the time of Trump, the first time a U.S. president said that they are
Yeah.
going to defend Taiwan militarily, away from the Kissinger era
Sure.
of strategic ambiguity.
Yeah.
So,
That was
are
during
this,
Biden.
Are this not? Biden. Are these not elements of a strategy?
Elements do not make a strategy.
Yeah.
So, and that's my so the in some ways the ingeniousness of China's gray zone strategy is that it takes advantage of all the gaps in our bureaucracy. So we have the military to do military things. We have diplomacy going on in the State Department. We have the Homeland Security doing its thing. But we like all of those neat little boxes. We're either at peace or at war, where it's either legal or illegal, all of these things. And they just fill in the gaps where they know that we don't have something that can sort of counter them.
So there's a lack of a counter strategy to this day. But what are you looking for essentially?
Well, what I told the Foreign Relations Committee was what I think is somebody needs to be in charge of gray zone counter strategy, right? So
Specifically just gray zone.
specifically
Okay.
gray zone,
All
right?
right.
Because we have people at Indo-PACOM and in the Pentagon
Correct.
who are
I was
working on
gonna say,
military
right,
strategy,
exactly.
right?
Yeah. Right.
But the problem is that, okay, whose job is the maritime militia, right? Maritime militia is a bunch of fishing ships that don't fish,
Yeah.
that are double-hulled and used as a paramilitary force, and it's nobody's job to counter the maritime militia, right? It's so, I mean, and of course, the other piece of this is alongside gray zone warfare is political warfare, which China also conducts. And that's another thing. So we divide times into times of peace and times of war. Right now, for the most part, America is at peace. But China doesn't divide. They're both at peace and at war at the same time, right? So they have an ongoing gray zone and political war that they are conducting at all times. And we are sort of,
Are
we're
you-
being-
That's what I want to say, because gray zone strategy should be part of a bigger strategy.
Yes.
Because China's gray zone strategy is part of, as you said, a bigger
Yeah.
political, technological, economic
Right.
strategy. So you
Ideological.
cannot engage them simply on a very tactical level.
I agree.
Yeah.
And, so what I think actually what would need to happen is that when we do put out our next national security strategy, there should be a part of that devoted to counter gray zone.
But
Are
you
you-
might
are
be
you-
changing
but
administrations
why?
every 4 years. Unlike China, they stay there in secula secularum.
Does that sound
Ruler
like
for life.
that sound like a criticism?
And by the way, are you at peace? Didn't you just rename your Defense Department to Department of War?
I didn't.
Okay, well,
I
I'm just
didn't do it, you know. You think they called me?
Okay, anyway.
But Ray, you're saying it's...
Part of the weakness is the fact that you might be changing your strategies every so often.
Well,
every,
and that
every administration.
so that's the curse of democracy, right? You know, and that is one of the things that China knows, right? China understands. I mean, like the Philippines, the United States, Taiwan, its adversaries are cursed with the quote. In the words of Winston Churchill, the worst system in the world, except for everything else that's been tried, right? So, you know, it's a blessing and a curse, right? And we have to just accept that we're going to have to figure this out so that eventually we develop an enduring gray zone strategy. And we do actually, you know, the Biden strategy from the first Trump administration, national security strategy, it was actually a lot of continuity there. So we are going to have these big disruptions. But if we can think through this and, again, put somebody in charge of it so they can sort of, you know, rally the forces and get people focused, then that will be a major step.
But at what level should the strategy be developed?
So I think it's a National Security Council thing. You know, I in my Senate testimony, I essentially, you know, argued for essentially a deputy national security advisor whose job it is to develop this strategy. So.
I think Annie has a question.
China's been doing this for quite some time, so many years now. You're saying the U.S. never developed, even conceptualized or thought about maybe we should start responding to this gray zone tactics. In the Australians are talking about hybrid, the Japanese are talking about hybrid threats.
Yeah.
But how come the U.S. is not talking about it?
Well, okay, so it's not that we don't talk about it. The Japanese talk about it, America talks about it, Australia, everybody talks about it. The question is, does anybody turn it into an executable strategy? And what I'm saying is that actually, among democracies generally, I was specifically talking to the United States because I was before the U.S. Senate. But this is a pretty broad problem across, I mean, I'm going to make the same basic argument when I go to Vietnam next week and talk to the Southeast Asian nations that are there. You know, it's actually a pretty big problem that we need to sort of look at corporately, but during my Senate testimony, of course, I was laser focused on the U.S.
But even China
But
is
Australia and Japan
changing
are, when they talk
strategy.
about...
No? During the time of Deng Xiaoping and Zhou Enlai, it's basically defensive. Let us outweight them. They will eventually.
Hide and bide, we would call it.
They will eventually implode in their own contradictions. The West. But when Xi Jinping arrived, it became more offensive. World diplomacy, competition as a superpower, etc. So they also are adjusting.
They are.
I
mean, one of the things is their rising confidence is giving them the sort of a mandate to go ahead and see how far can we push this. I mean, that's why you've seen all of this new activity, for example, around sealing off Scarborough Shoal, you know, these kinds of things you see. This is not something that would have happened a few years ago, but now it's happening because they're beginning to feel confident enough, and they also are feeling like, you know what, we haven't really paid any big price for anything that we've done so far, you know.
So they're pushing the envelope.
I think Amy, you were saying something about Australia and Japan.
Yeah, Australia and Japan, when they talk about hybrid strategy, it's a whole of government approach. You know, they include economic and
defense.
No, not just defense, not just security, but information technology. They are using extensively AI or all these technological advances, and it's part of a integrated strategy. It's a new type of defense. And you're saying it's not yet happening in the US. I understand that there is also a lot of discussion within the Pentagon I'm not sure about the Trump administration, but before we were hearing about it as well from the US.
Well, so I don't want to lead anybody astray. I don't think that the U.S. is lagging behind Australia and Japan. I think that we all have the same problem. And again, everybody talks about the gray zone. It's just a matter, and I mean, like during the Biden administration, we had something called, in the U.S., we had something called integrated deterrence, where we wanted to sort of bring everything together. The problem was, it never really happened. So there wasn't somebody in charge of it, and they didn't really whip the forces into, everybody was doing it. So what I'm saying is we actually have to go a few steps beyond where we've been thinking up until now and recognize that just in the same way that we have this integrated threat, we actually need to have an integrated response.
And nobody takes Australia seriously as a naval power.
Well, I mean,
Ouch.
I'm not going to be dissing on Australia here. I used to be the defense attaché to Australia. I have a lot of friends down there. So,
I mean, they're trying to be. I mean, to their credit, they are investing in their naval forces. But what I was going to ask is, all right, so you went and testified at this committee at the Senate Foreign Relations. What was the outcome? I know you were trying to get some of the language of your testimony into the bills that they eventually write, but did you get a sense of how favorable they were to what you said?
They were very favorable. Now, the proof will be in the pudding, right? If in the coming months we begin to see people begin to slip language into some of these bills, that's when we'll actually know. But the legislative process is, it's what we call making sausage, right? It's
Again,
ugly,
the curse of democracy, right?
Exactly.
On more concrete terms, like Scarborough, the Chinese have publicly said they will take over Scarborough as their
Maritime
geo-reserve. No? What does that mean? Will they really establish physical barriers for Filipino fishermen?
They already have.
But
Will
I
they
think
put the facilities there?
Okay, so
Like
that's the
Mischief
$1 million,
Show.
right? So
Yes.
that's the $1 million question, and of course, everybody got very excited when we saw those aerial pictures of something that looked like construction, and then we realized it was actually
It was
something in the
old,
Philippines,
yeah.
put there a while ago. But no, I think everybody's thinking about that. One of the interesting things about China's nature reserve is it only basically covers a third of Scarborough Shoal. It's basically the northeast part of the triangle. So they've kind of left it open as to whether or not the rest of it is something they could build on in the future. And I think at the very least, they're going to hold that out as a sort of an enduring threat. Like, if you make us really mad, maybe we'll put something here, And there's a long history of this, right? So, for example, when China built its artificial islands, Mischief Reef, Fiery Cross Reef, Subi Reef, those kinds of things, Xi Jinping went to the White House, he stood in the Rose Garden right next to Barack Obama and said, we have no intention of militarizing these features, right? But within a year, they were militarizing them.
Yes.
Because why? Because they said, well, America's scary freedom of navigation operations made us do it. We couldn't help it. We have to defend ourselves because these American ships go by. Well, America's been doing freedom of navigation operations around the globe for 40 years, but this was an excuse to do what they planned to do all along, which is to militarize the features. So, I mean, obviously, I'm sure that the AFP and the Philippine Coast Guard and everybody is going to be watching, in the United States and everybody else, Sea Light, be watching very closely to see what happens there. And in the first sign of something actually, if it begins to look like it's going to be built, that will be, I think, a major international.
At this point, you have no worries that something is going to be built because of that announcement.
I have worries all the time, but I don't have any indication that it's about to happen.
But what was
physical
the statement
structure.
about? If
What's
they made a statement that they will build their own nature reserve. What does that mean?
I don't think
if
so.
It doesn't have any substance inside.
Here's the thing: I am a firm believer that the condition of Scarborough Shoal is actually quite bad. China's giant clam harvesting went on there for over a decade.
Unabated.
It is extremely destructive behavior. I noticed Sea Light documented that last year, around May, all of a sudden, all of the giant clam harvesting ships left, and they've never come back. And at the same time, China sent these researchers down, and they put out this report that says, everything's great. It's a beautiful place. Now they've been sending out like these videos that show how beautiful Scarborough Shoal is. I think the fact that they banished the giant clam harvesters tells you everything you need to know about what the real condition of Scarborough Shoal is. So I think the nature reserve thing is just part of their lawfare. It's one more thing to say we own it so we can establish a nature reserve.
So it's more on the level of propaganda,
Yes.
for now.
Oh, yeah.
Or they're trying to protect what they claim to be their own now.
Exactly. I mean, so
Because it's ours, so we have
they could
to.
say, hey, we're taking care of the environment. Everybody be quiet. We're responsible stewards of this thing we just stole.
Is that going to work?
Ray,
In the short term, I mean, what's the counter? Right?
Correct, exactly.
So,
and no one's countering it at this point. I mean,
think,
you could file diplomatic protest,
right.
but what does it do?
I think you have to think very long term, right? How do occupations end? They end when the occupier gets tired of the fight, right? And so, and it happens even to the greatest empires in the world. It happened to the U.S. and Afghanistan. It happened to Britain in India. It happens over a long period of time, but it is a long fight, which is why it's important that, like, the Philippine Coast Guard and BFAR and the Navy continue to go out there to show the flag and to say, we have not given up on our claim.
Let me change gears. Let me change gears. What happened in August with the Chinese Navy apparently trying to ram one of our vessels?
Yeah.
Instead ending up ramming one of its own.
Yeah.
What does that tell you? Because before, we wouldn't see something like that.
We would not see the Chinese Navy. So BRP Suluan, according to the reports, was within 10.5 nautical miles of Scarborough Shoal. China has been trying to enforce a 30 nautical mile exclusion zone. So in other words, the Suluan was well inside the exclusion zone. And I believe that the destroyer came in to essentially establish order, right? We have to teach these guys a lesson. And the PLA Navy and the China Coast Guard are not used to working in close tactical coordination. So they got their wires crossed. And in the end, the PLA ship, the destroyer, had to make a decision as to which way it was going to go when the other ship, when the China Coast Guard ship got in the way. And fortunately, for all of us, and especially for the people on the
there were people there documenting
they did not veer 2 degrees to the starboard and essentially send the Suluan to the bottom of the sea, because that could easily have happened.
Because they're chasing the Angge, the Sulu, and it was small and fast. So they hit each other while chasing our Coast Guard vessel. And our Coast Guard vessel was able to leave quickly.
Yeah.
Because there are other Chinese vessels there. They will chase it with a vengeance. Yeah. That's why the Angge, the Sulu, has never returned.
And the funny thing about it was
they
flipped it around.
They knew they're going to have their revenge.
Yeah, the funny thing about it was they flipped it around and said the Philippines needs to compensate the Chinese Navy for the damage.
The funny thing was, for 4 days, they didn't know how to talk about it, because they couldn't admit that there was a collision between their own ships.
They made a mistake.
They had no idea how to, but they kept saying that the Philippines was responsible for the damage for the incident they couldn't name.
Yeah.
And so finally, it took them 4 days to come up with they say, okay, actually, we did hit each other. But of course, it's all the Philippines' fault.
Because they had several layers of exclusion zone. The 30 kilometer mile, the 20, and the 10. We were able to reach the 10. That's why it became very intense.
Well, and that's why I put out my statement this morning defending the Philippine Coast Guard against some of these attacks. And again, I am very reticent to get into Philippine domestic politics. I don't belong there. It is not my intention to argue with anybody in the political sphere. But I believe with all sincerity that there is no braver Coast Guard in the world than the Philippine Coast Guard. Demonstrably so. There is no other Coast Guard that faces overwhelming odds with the devotion, with the resilience, with the professionalism, with the courage the Philippine Coast Guard does. And the fact that they have been singled out for this kind of attack, frankly, just offends me. And I just, I can't believe somebody would think that way.
Well, you haven't met anybody who talks with cats that way.
You mean by that you mean to abolish the Coast Guard, just for the benefit of our viewers who don't know.
Ray,
go ahead.
The Coast Guard needs a lot. Our Coast Guard needs a lot of help, and if the U.S. does not have an integrated strategy to deal with gray zone tactics, how does that impact our mutual defense treaty? People are asking, Filipinos are asking, how will the U.S. help us in problems like this, like in the declaration of the nature reserve? Of course, we will be sending our troops, well, not troops, but we will be sending our fishermen there. Yeah. And Ronald is helping in mobilizing people to go there. And but what will the U.S. do? That's what the people want.
So I don't know what the U.S. will do. I'm not in those circles. And of course,
Yeah.
I've made my arguments. I did note that actually just before we went on air today, there was an announcement between Secretary Hegseth and Secretary Teodoro in Kuala Lumpur of some new thing called Task Force Philippines. I don't know what it is. They seem very happy about it. You know, hopefully it's something new that's going to help integrate, at least on the military side, the responses to a lot of these aggressions. But again, we're just going to have to wait for the details.
Maybe
to
that's
come
what
out.
you've been asking for all along, gray zone strategy.
I don't know. I mean, but again, I would like to see it at a higher level. I would
Right.
like to see it at the National Security Council level, but I'll take what I can get.
How about another
If
elephant in the
if
room?
U.S. vessels,
No? Another
if
elephant
U.S.
in the room.
vessels
Taiwan.
escort the
Hold on.
Philippines.
Let's go with Ami first. Go, Ami.
Yeah, if U.S. vessels escort Philippine vessels, will that be seen as provocative
Well,
by China?
of course, because everything is seen as provocative by China. So, but again, the question is, escort Philippine vessels where, right? So, where are they going to escort Philippine vessels to? This is part of what was envisioned by these maritime cooperative activities or the joint patrols. And the Philippines, of course, has been working very hard to expand the number of countries involved in those. But I think eventually you have to ask the questions, where do you want the escorts to go to? There was a long discussion, of course, back before last June about should there be escort for the Philippine vessels out to, Ayungin
Yes.
Shoal.
Ayungin.
That
seems
has
to
been
be-
rejected.
That's kind of been pushed to the background now anyway because
Yeah.
there's this accommodation that's been made. But yeah, I mean, eventually that you have to ask those questions.
It's the Philippines Army who rejected that proposal,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
the
yeah.
Americans.
Ronald, you had a question about
Yeah,
Taiwan.
another elephant in the room, Taiwan.
Yes.
Because several months ago, for the first time, the president of the Philippines talked about preparing for war in
Yeah.
Taiwan. No, I was amazed by that speech. So, what's going to happen there? No, some are saying for the Chinese, this is the best time to take over Taiwan because you have a president who is a bit tentative.
I continue to believe and say publicly that I do not believe that Xi Jinping wants war over Taiwan. I believe he thinks the gray zone strategy is working and that the threat of war is part of the gray zone strategy.
And that's enough
Yes.
to
So
eventually
I have
take back
described
Taiwan.
the strategy for Taiwan is more like a boa constrictor than like a viper. So rather than a strike, it's a squeeze. And again, they understand democracies. They're hoping to get a more compliant government in Taipei in the future that will say, maybe if we give them a little more of what they want, then they'll be nice to us. Maybe we can still have harmony and everybody can do business and people will live in peace. And so, if they want to patrol our waters for us, well, maybe that's good for us. Maybe we can save money that way. And so you just give, again, this is what a gray zone strategy is designed to do, is to get you, to convince you that they are inevitable and it will work better for you if you just accept their supremacy and then you can just sort of be absorbed. And so that's what I think that their strategy remains. I think the threat of war will remain, and I think they are preparing for war, but I don't think they want to go to war.
Let me go back to the collision in August. What would have happened if the Chinese Navy hit the BRP Sulu?
Yeah.
And how would that complicate things as far as the NDT is concerned?
I think that it would be very hard for President Marcos not to invoke the NDT at that point, because he's already said at Shangri-La last year that if a single Philippine sailor dies, that becomes an act of war. So,
But
I
what
think,
will be the reaction of the Americans?
well,
Exactly.
right. So this gets us into the question. Here's the thing: is just because you invoke the MDT
Yes.
doesn't mean you automatically go to war.
That's a longer process.
So I think that oftentimes we sort of, again, this is our habit as Western democracies or Western-style democracies who like things in neat categories. We think that the MDT is like this on-off switch, war, peace,
Yes.
war, So now we flipped it to war. But what would actually just happen is that the U.S. and the Philippines would then get together and think, okay,
talk.
what do we do about this?
Yeah.
And I think that it would have ended up as a severe diplomatic crisis, but I don't know that it would necessarily have driven us to war. But certainly that's always a threat. It's always a concern.
But the million-dollar question remains, would the U.S. show up? And under Trump 2.0, it's a big question mark.
This is actually was discussion during my 60 Minutes interview last year. The entire U.S. alliance system is built ultimately on a political decision,
Right.
Because there's no judge who's going to show up and rap the gavel and say, U.S., you're in violation of your MDT, therefore you have to, go stand in the corner. in the end, what it does, though, is it calls into question every other alliance commitment that the U.S. makes if we are seen to have not responded well. I mean, look at Scarborough Shoal in 2012. You know, it created a great deal of concern and resentment in the Philippines when the U.S. was not clear about our alliance commitments after 2012. And then we went and said something very, about Japan and the Senkakus that sounded like, hey, what about us?
Yeah.
So, those are political choices, and there's nobody who can guarantee that somebody's going to make the right choice.
What is the U.S. government now concerned about those things? How we feel and how we react? For example, Europe. Are they concerned with that, and other countries? Because compared to previous American governments, it appears that this government is less sensitive,
interested,
about
less caring about.
So again, I think your mileage may vary, right? So if you watch Secretary Hegseth, I can never pronounce his name, standing next to Secretary Teodoro, he sounded very resolute. When Secretary Rubio, who's sometimes also the national security advisor and sometimes the national archivist, he's got like 7 jobs. When he speaks in very resolute terms.
Yeah.
The fact that you don't get the President of the United States out there talking about the Philippines, obviously I wish he would. But then sometimes I hear him talk, and I'm not sure I want him to talk about the Philippines because he's a little bit, he's a little bit all over the place, right? But I think that there is within the Trump administration a reservoir of deep commitment to the Philippines, and so I take some comfort from that.
How will the latest meeting between Xi and Trump affect that? How do you assess the latest engagement between Trump and Xi?
And remember as well when President Marcos went to visit President Trump in the White House in June, during the press conference, Trump was asked about what he thought of China, and he said, "I have no problems with China.
Go on.
I could have, we could be friends with them."
I will tell you.
So it's not a matter of black and white. It's not a matter of choosing this side or that side. But the fact is, to Ronald's question, right, about whether or not.
Yeah. I was recently at Stanford, and we had some young ASEAN leaders were there, and I was talking to them, and they asked me similar questions. What do we do about President Trump, right? And what I said was, don't ride the roller coaster, right? Because he is in some ways, he's the most transparent president we've ever had. He says whatever's on his mind at any moment. So we tend to, we're just trained to look for some great meaning in everything the president says, because every other president, what they say is like everything that's already been poll tested and gone through the staff, and they said these are the best things to say, and President Trump just says whatever he thinks
at
any moment in time.
Yeah.
Exactly, and so you just can't ride the roller coaster. You just have to say, look. When I was in Australia, sometimes the Aussies would come to me and what did he mean when he said this? And I would say, wait 48 hours. If nothing else happens, it's like a ship that passed in the night. It doesn't mean anything. He's just talking.
Watching you, Ray, that sounds like a mouthful.
Interesting way of looking at it. He's the most transparent president you've ever had.
That is an interesting way to look at it. And you do make a good point. So coming back to the Coast Guard, again, to reiterate, that's a very important point you made. You think the Philippine Coast Guard is the bravest Coast Guard in the world. But, and we talk about how good they are at maneuvering and running away from the Chinese vessels, but they are still also operating old, rusting boats.
Yes.
What do they need at this point?
Well, so they are getting newer vessels, right? They're getting some from Japan and some from France, and so they are getting other vessels.
How about from the U.S.?
I would say they're operating. The U.S. has a very different system, but so oftentimes they'll be like what we call ODA. It's what we call something defense articles. I can't remember what the O stands for, but excess defense EDA, excess defense articles. So we often will give those, and we'll renovate them, and we'll give them to the Philippines. But in the past, actually, some of the Coast Guard vessels have ended up as Philippine Navy vessels. They painted them gray instead.
Right.
But I think just as important, though, is going to be the training and because you need more people to operate more vessels, and that That's you can't just throw a bunch of ships out there and they're not going to sail themselves, right? So you have to actually build. Capacity building is a very large thing. So it's going to be, and it's a slow thing. You don't just turn it off and on. It's going to take a lot of time. But I think that, the trajectory is good. And as I said, it's a long-term problem where, the Philippines is on a long-term trajectory. I'm encouraged by the trajectory.
Fantastic. Okay, we'll leave that there. Thank you so much for talking to us today. Yeah. That was maritime security expert and the director of the Stanford Gordian Knot Center, Ray Powell.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy Halloween.
Thanks.
You didn't come in costume. You should have shown up in costume.
Yeah,
Trick or treat.
Oh yes, this is my costume. I forgot to say. Thank you for joining Storycon today. It's too late. Amy Pamintuan, editor-in-chief of the Philippine Star, Ronald Llamas, a resident political heckler. Join us again on Monday, 4 p.m. for Storycon. I'm Regina Lake.
I never thought you'd do something like that.
Oh yeah. You said it fit me.
Come on in. We are one news, all sides, all the time.
This is the Story Conference Group or the Storycon Group.